can start with the opening remarks as it's stated on the agenda. And for this, I will kindly ask Milou Beerepoot, Project Manager at Regional Program Neighborhood South at DG previously NEAR, to start with the opening remarks. Please, Milou.
Thank you, Tiziana, and good morning, everyone. Happy to be here in this discussion between the MedGem project and the Just Green Africa project. I think from what I've seen, there are some good alignments and shared ideas among these two projects. And maybe just for the ones that do not yet know the MedGem project, this is a project that was initiated by the European Commission in order to encourage exchange between the European Union and the Northern Mediterranean region on the subject of green hydrogen. And this is, of course, directly coming from the ambition of the European Union to become climate neutral by 2050, and also the ideas that were explained in the Repower EU plan in 2022, where there has been a great emphasis on the Mediterranean region for its potential to produce renewable hydrogen. So I'm happy to see that with this MedGem project, we are now more and more building up a network of relevant stakeholders, both in from Europe and the Mediterranean region, to discuss this potential and also to exchange views and also policy approaches. And there, I think I see that that the Just Green Africa project is also working towards similar goals. I'm thereby also quite intrigued by the word "just," and I think this is also something very important that we can elaborate on further. So I'm very happy to see and listen to today's discussion, and hope we can all benefit from it. So looking forward. Over to you, Tiziana.
Thank you very much, Milou. Indeed, it's a great collaboration, and there is a next webinar waiting for us next November. So we are continuing on this path. If I can ask now Stephano to say a few remarks on behalf of Just Green Africa.
Yes, for sure. Good morning, everybody. I don't know what's happening with my webcam. Sorry for this. I'm trying to opening and closing it, but it's not working. Nevertheless, as Miss Beerepoot said, it is a real pleasure even for us to be here with MedGem, because many of the purposes and objectives of our project are similar. Actually, Just Green Africa was born in the framework of the Repower EU plan, also to support the cooperation between Africa and Europe, particularly trying to support from one side Europe to identify the best interlocutor for its need of importing the 10 megaton of green hydrogen that the Repower EU plan is foreseeing in its lines, and at the same time to support Africa to develop its own green hydrogen strategy, its own green hydrogen potential, trying to avoid any type of colonialism, trying to avoid any type of new, as I said, colonialism of the continent for hydrogen purposes. As it was said, the word "just" is one of the most important words in our project, because we are targeting to make something that is sustainable from a social, environmental, and economic point of view. And also, thanks to the support of MedGem, I'm sure we will be able to find the best strategies at this purpose. For example, also looking not only to the production and export of pure hydrogen, but maybe of green molecules starting from green hydrogen.
Thank you, Stefano. Then I pass on the floor to Frank on behalf of MedGem.
Yes, thank you. And of course, the network fully supports the basically the objective of the Just Green Africa network. Africa has always been rich in resources, but has been relatively poor in let's say reaping the benefits for their own population. And what we would like to do in the future going forward, correct that. And colonialization is, of course, an element, but also now the extractive industry isn't always as fair as it can be. But the richness that Africa has in terms of renewable energy resources, and then the ability to also become a major exporter of these green fuels and green molecules and green electrons to places like Europe who needs it. That is, of course, what we're trying to all work on without making the mistakes of the extractive industry. So I would like to first and foremost the local population to benefit, the local economies to flourish. And of course, you can combine that very well with exporting and earning foreign exchange. So that is part of what we're trying to do. And we're here today to learn a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Frank. And before we go into the technical topics, we will just delve into a little bit more into the project so that we understand what they do exactly and how and why they are actually collaborating together today. So I will ask Stephano to make a short presentation on Just Green Africa project, maximum 10 minutes, and then Bandaly can follow for the Belgium project. Please, Stephano.
For sure. Thank you again for your introduction, Tiziana. And I'm going to briefly introduce the Just Green Africa project. As I was stating, Just Green Africa is a project that has been funded by the Clean Hydrogen Partnership and the European Union. And it is a project that started in February 2023. It is a coordination and support action, unfortunately very short because it's just 24 months. So we are going to end our adventure during the next January. But let's say its goal, as I mentioned, is to develop mutual benefit roadmaps between Europe and Africa in order to develop mutually their green hydrogen transition. When I say that to develop mutual roadmaps, I'm mostly referring to the fact that in Europe, we have already a hydrogen roadmap that was, let's say, released in the 2019-2020, and also we have, as I mentioned earlier, the recent guidelines received by REPowerEU. Differently, for what it concerns Africa, despite the very great potential of the continent, we do not have at African Union, so at pan-continental level, any roadmap. So one of the goals of the project is to, first of all, try to understand which are the countries that already have some hydrogen policies, and at the same time support the creation of roadmap at different levels. For example, R&D roadmap, manufacturing roadmap, financing roadmap, etc. Develop a just transition of the overall African continent. When I say just, as I said, the just transition, the word just is really pivotal in our project because, as I mentioned earlier, we would like really to promote a transition to green hydrogen that must be sustainable at economic, at social, at environmental, and also financing level. Why we are starting from Africa? Obviously, because Africa has an exceptional renewable energy potential with a great solar irradiation and also very windy coastlines and area with very high constant wind rates, and this fact of having a very large renewable potential could enable us to produce green hydrogen at low cost of levelized cost of hydrogen, because at the end of the day, we have always to think that when we look at the cost of hydrogen from electrolysis, more than the 50-60% comes from of the cost of the electricity that we provide to the electrolyzer. Further to this, hydrogen is very strategic for Africa, not only for its renewable potential, but also for the fact that hard-to-abate industries are quite often present in different African countries, and therefore Africa could already have its own hydrogen demand in countries where sectors like fertilizers, steels, refineries, mining, metallurgic are already present, and often these type of industries are owned by European companies. Thus, it already exists an exporting of this type of goods that could be therefore locally decarbonized. So as I mentioned, Africa can have a unique hydrogen value proposition because of its huge renewable potential that can bring a levelized cost of hydrogen for renewable hydrogen up to 1.5, 2.5 euro per kilogram. That is a cost that is comparable to the natural gas steam reforming one, so of the gray hydrogen. We have also to consider that looking at the potential of exporting hydrogen to Europe, but I would like to say to all over the world, Africa has a pivotal position in different shipping routes and also has gas infrastructure that from the north of the continent are via their natural gas pipeline connecting North Africa with Europe. And here we will see later with the support of Artelis colleagues that this infrastructure is very strategic for cooperation between Europe and Africa. And last but not least, also the possibility, further than the presence of hard-to-abate industries that can locally use already today this green hydrogen, the produced green hydrogen, we have also to think that there are some natural hydrogen reservoirs in Africa. One of the first that have been discovered in Mali is actually in Africa. And therefore, this could be also another future opportunity. At the same time, this huge potential of Africa in green hydrogen sector made African hydrogen, let's call it, as a sort of buzzword. If you indeed look for green hydrogen Africa on Google, you will find more than 42 million results. So one of the goals of the project is also to try to put some order on many shouting louds of many announcements that are currently ongoing to understand what is actually feasible and practically feasible. And to do so, the project will work at different levels, looking at modeling activities, looking at road mapping and policies creation activity, but also looking at with the crucial role of stakeholders and with the continuous interaction with stakeholders as one of the key ingredients of our project. As we are doing today, also during this webinar, one of the goals of the project is to interact with people who is trying to mobilize hydrogen in Africa in order to collect their suggestions and to make our roadmaps align with their expectation and their desiderata. Another relevant activity that the project is pursuing is training. So also we are promoting training activities, both physical and virtual. For example, 2 weeks ago, we had the chance to meet my GEM colleagues in Marrakesh for a training that we organized thereby. And last week, we organized another one in Nigeria. But further to this, we are also promoting a full e-learning activity. In these e-learning activities, we are presenting all the results of our project and all the activities that, as I said, are foreseeing modeling activities, for example, of renewable energy potential, of water access, that is another key issue for what it concerns identification of green hydrogen capabilities in the continent, but also, as we will see later, which is the impact on the natural gas infrastructure and also on the European energy system of this potential import of green hydrogen. The project can be divided in 3 phases. In all of these phases that I already briefly mentioned, the role of stakeholders is crucial, but I would like to say it's particularly crucial in this moment where, we are going to present modeling results, as we are doing today with Artelis support, in order to collect suggestions and insights towards the putting together the results of our modeling and the suggestions and inputs coming from the stakeholders towards the drafting of the roadmaps that we are targeting to present in a final event in Rabat in January 2025. Further to this, as you may imagine, the role of stakeholders is key, as I already mentioned, and to make stakeholders interactive with us, we also created a platform whose link is there in these slides, where stakeholders can find, let's say, opportunity to inter-exchange with each other, but also can find materials, deliverables of the project, announcement of events and relevant events organized by the project on the topic of green hydrogen, etc. Let's say the project is driven by University of Geneva, but it also involves different partners from both Europe and Africa. Here is a picture of our event in Nairobi. Among them, we can identify different universities and research centers, but also SMEs like Artelis, who is together with us today, who are supporting the whole activities that I mentioned earlier that we are pursuing in the project. And we also realized about the first year of the project a brief poster where we tried to put in a nutshell all the results of the first year. That the first year had mostly the goal of assessing what is the green hydrogen potential and what are the countries that are promoting hydrogen policies, green hydrogen policies, and let's say we put everything together in some deliverables that you can find on our project website and on Cordis because they are full public. I would like to remark this, all the material from our project is full public, so it will be possible for all of you to access it. And it's also possible to all of you to access to our e-learning platform. Actually, our e-learning campaign is divided in 2 packages. The first package has been released last year, and it is up and running with more than 150 trainees so far, and with more than 12 hours of recorded contents available on in the website that you can see here. And I would like to say that in the next weeks, really between end of October and early November, we are going to release the second package. The second package that is presenting some of the crucial results of Just Green Africa activities, while the first package was more dedicated to introduction to fuel cell and hydrogen technologies. So what's next? Keep the eyes open on our website because, as I said, a lot of things are coming in the next week. As I mentioned, the release of the second e-learning package, also the release of Work Package 2 and modeling deliverables that we are going to upload and submit within the end of October, and we are going to also upload on our Africa platform. We are going to have a stakeholders event, in the framework of the European Hydrogen Week in November in Brussels. So this is a very recent news that we received within the weekend. So I'm glad to announce it today. And obviously also the second MedJam webinar that I think we are going to present at the end of this today webinar, where we are going to present further results of our project, as we will do in the final event in Rabat. So keep the eyes open on our website, www.justgreenafrica.eu, and I hope you will be interested in the project at 360 degrees, and I hope also we will continuously cooperate with MedJam. As said, the topics are very, very similar.
Thank you very much, Stefano, and congratulations for all the achievements that the project has done in such short amount of time. It's very impressive and inspiring for us as well. I will then ask Bandaly to move on with the MedJam project introduction, please.
Yes,
you have 10 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Tiziana. So to give you a brief introduction about the MedJam project, one moment. Yes. So a brief introduction to the MedJam network. Our project is basically an EU initiative. It is a technical assistance project that is funded by the European Commission, namely DGNIR, which is the Director General for Neighborhood Enlargement and Negotiations. The duration of this project is over the span of 30 months. We have started basically at the beginning of last year, and the project is expected to last until mid of 2025. But there are talks of extending the MedJam network until the end of 2026. So the MedJam network covers 9 countries in the southern Mediterranean region, all the way from Lebanon to Morocco. We have also talks of access for Mauritania and Turkey to join our network. And to describe the overall objective of the network of the MedGem project is to create and operate a Mediterranean green electrons and molecules network in the southern Mediterranean region. And this goal is aimed to be achieved by convening dialogue and collaborative technical assistance activities with key energy stakeholders. And the importance, of course, of this is to facilitate and promote the growth of the green energy and molecules industry at the regional and national levels. And as you can see from the title of this presentation, basically the MedGem network operates in the southern Mediterranean with close cooperation with the European Union will be needed for this kind of collaboration. And to give you a brief introduction about our team, we have Frank Wouters as team leader, and we also have Mustafa Taumi and Raya Verniers as technical and communication key experts, respectively. We also have Tiziana De Harley as project manager, and our Tawfiq Rizqalla as technical manager, and myself as energy advisor. And we also so this is the stable team of MedGem, and we also have a large pool of non-key experts. Some of them are the country correspondents who act as the main communication point in each member countries, as well as other consultants who are working on several of our activities. And to give you a general idea of the MedGem network structure, we have three main components. The main component, let's say, is the policy component, which is represented by our steering committee. This steering committee involves national focal points, the NFPs, who are usually representatives from each member's energy ministry or authority, as well as the country correspondents. We also have the industrial component, and this industrial component is represented by the Industry Advisory Board, the IAB. It consists of industrial associations and energy stakeholders from across the region. And also within this advisory board, we have a number of working groups. We have the infrastructure working group, the skills working group, and the local value creation one. We also have, soon there will be a new working group related to standards and certification. And also we have the finance component, whose target institutions, and let's say, is the local developers and financial and banking institutions. And to give you a main idea about the recurring events that MedGem is holding, we have been organizing a biannual meeting consisting of the steering committee meeting, which involves the national focal points, the country correspondents, where they gather feedback and discuss and plan the project's next steps. And we also have the Industry Advisory Board meeting. These gather the steering committee members in addition to key stakeholders from industrial associations, from port authorities, from different energy partners to agree on the upcoming action plan. And also we had the CBAM training that was delivered by the European Commission. This training included an interesting introduction to energy trading system, ETS, and carbon pricing, as well as an implementation guidelines for the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. There was also one on Euromesco, on a Euromesco policy study and a roundtable discussion. And to give you a main idea of the key activities that MedGem is currently implementing, we have the gap analysis studies. These gap analysis studies have been 3 consultants or experts are currently working on these studies in 5 select countries. One is on local value creation. The main objective of this gap analysis study is the identification of requirements for local manufacturing of green hydrogen and renewable energy components. We also have a specification of the necessary production facilities, the specialized equipment and technological infrastructure necessary. and determining the support systems needed, including supply chains and transportation logistics. We also have the other study on infrastructure to identify the gaps in the infrastructure required. And this is important not just for the Southern Mediterranean region, but also for Europe, for the infrastructures of both regions to be, let's say, complementary. And also there's a need to have the regulatory frameworks harmonized. So there's an analysis of the regulatory frameworks and policies that impact green hydrogen infrastructure development. And there is an assessment of the economic and investment opportunities and funding mechanisms available for infrastructure projects. And the last third study is the skills one. There will be a comprehensive review of existing literature, including the European Hydrogen Skills Strategy. And there will be an identification and interviewing of key stakeholders with regards to upskilling the current workforce. And also, one of MEDGEM's key second activity is the certification pilot. This certification pilot has been launched in June and is expected to last till the end of the year. And it's basically a pre-certification study where projects currently are under development are assessed whether the produced green hydrogen or PTX products will be truly green. And this TOR was open for all member countries. They could, any project in these member countries could apply to it. And one was selected in Morocco. It is owned by Innovax, which is a company specialized in projects with high environmental impact. And also MEDGEM chose a certification body to perform this pre-certification, which is Initio. It is a consultancy firm specialized in energy transition. And this pre-certification will be conducted by Initio in affiliation with Certify-HY, which operates a European RFNBO scheme, which is renewable fuels of non-biological origin. And also, one of the third key activities of MEDGEM has been the organizing of hackathons. 2 hackathons have been implemented, one in Morocco, one in Lebanon. At the beginning of the hackathon, of course, was open to students from universities in engineering and other scientific majors. They received a summer school training on Power-to-X and green hydrogen, and they identified problems or challenges that are facing their countries with regards to development of these technologies. So they came up also with solutions that they refined and developed over the course of the hackathon. And they were able to present it in the example of Moroccan participants during the PTX summit in Marrakesh, which was a great opportunity for them. And also the Lebanon hackathon, the initial round was completed recently in October, and the final round will be finished in the next week. So the winning teams from both countries, they will get awarded with a study trip to Germany. This will be in cooperation with the FAO University and will be held by the end of the year. And that's it. Thank you. And over back to you, Tiziana, for the presentations.
Thank you very much. And you can also learn more from us on LinkedIn or on the website page. We'll now move on with the actually core of the webinar and with the presentations. So I invite Thomas Bourhard from Artelis to present on the green H2 impact on EU H2 strategy. I think you've made a very large study on that, so we are looking forward to the methodology and the results, if you have some. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen. Thank you for inviting me as well. So as mentioned, I'm Thomas Bourhard from Artelis, and I've been managing the study. We have made on the impacts of green hydrogen imports on the EU hydrogen strategy. Just to provide you with a few elements on Artelis, we are an independent software edition and consulting company. So we are working on decision support, optimization, and different kinds of modeling. Briefly, what's interesting with our contribution in the Just Green Africa project is that we have experience with the full spectrum of the energy sector, because we can provide optimization tools and modeling tools in general. So we are working with, for example, system operators or big industrial customers, and we are also performing studies like the one we are going to present today. So more forward, future-oriented studies on long-term scenarios. Sometimes we are also working on a more local perspective, so we are kind of multifaceted. And R&D activities like the ones we are contributing to, for example, with Horizon Europe projects like Just Green Africa, is an important part of our activities. So for today's presentation, I want to talk about three main dimensions. The first one is on the role of renewable hydrogen in medium to long-term European scenarios, which leads me to the second one on the impact of these green hydrogen value chains from Africa supply chains on the main supply corridors for hydrogen in Europe in these scenarios. And then I will spend a bit more time on how we assess the impact of these imports on the needs for new hydrogen infrastructure in future energy systems in Europe. So this is one aspect of what is being addressed by the Just Green Africa project, as presented by Stephano. But it's also an important modeling work that has been conducting during the project, and that will pave the way for a more extended deliverable that is still to be published, but will be published by the end of the project. So just to give a little bit of context, we have been working in this study in the framework of the REPowerEU plan from 2022. So in this plan, as early as 2030, it is expected to be 20 megaton per year as in terms of supply of renewable hydrogen in EU 27. Among these 20 megaton, there would be 10 megatons that will be produced domestically by electrolysis, and 10 megatons that would be imported either directly in form of hydrogen with 6 megatons from extra European imports, and there will be also 4 megatons that will be directly imported in the form of ammonia and other derivatives. In general, the demand for hydrogen in Europe in this 2030 vision would mainly be targeted towards industry and transportation uses, but this already implies an important target for the development of electrolysis capacities, with several dozen gigawatts developed as early as 2030, and this is a dynamic that is expected to be maintained and accelerated until 2050, because, for example, in the 2030 climate target plan, this year there's always also been a 2040 climate target plan. If you look at the general long-term scenarios that underpin these plans, you would also see mentions of like several hundred gigawatts of electrolyzers developed in 2050. So there's a big topic regarding the development of the hydrogen demand and the hydrogen infrastructure in the European power system. When we work on this topic as energy modelers, like at Artelis, we first have in mind one key question that is about the optimization of the energy dispatch and operation of the European energy system, and in particular what it means in terms of flexibility needs, because the kind of modeling that we do for this study, for example, is hourly modeling of the energy system. And in particular, there's a key difference with what we see when we are working with the methane infrastructure, for example, because for methane, we would say, as a first order of approximation, that flexibility needs are mostly driven by the consumption. So basically the flexibility of the in the short run, the residential and the tertiary sectors, that could be hourly flexibility during the day, or also during the week, and also with a more seasonal pattern, with the thermosensitivity of demand. But yes, for natural gas infrastructure, we are talking about flexibility that is driven by the consumption. And on the side of the production, we can assume that the supply routes are largely flat, or at least, yes, we can accept, or we can say that these flexibility needs are mostly driven by consumption. For hydrogen, when we consider systems like in the REPowerEU framework, where we would have a lot of generation by electrolysis and domestically in Europe, we are facing questions regarding the variability of different energy sources, notably including solar PV, wind power, even hydro, seasonal patterns. And in this regard, there would be a lot of flexibility needs that are driven by the production of electrolytic hydrogen, which means that the needs for infrastructure need to be estimated with, well, a different route in terms of a modeling approach. And this is really one of the key questions that we are trying to address in this type of studies. So now that I have briefly presented the general framework, I want to talk a bit more about what it means for the European hydrogen supply corridors, in particular, because well, maybe this is obvious, but all the countries in Europe do not have the same potential for either generating hydrogen, in particular if we talk about electrolysis, or in terms of the demand, because well, the industry sector in one country or the other may be different. So there would be countries where the demand is very concentrated, and countries where there's a lot of potential, notably for renewable generation, which could be coupled with the development of electrolysis. So even as early as 2030, we could expect that there could be high hydrogen needs in some countries, in particular around Central Europe and Germany, for example, and more generation from the south, which would create some import and export balances that are very different from a country to another. One interesting exercise from there, and that has already been conducted, for example, by the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative, would be to try and identify main supply routes that would take into account countries that could be exporters and regions that would be more importers. And when we talk about having hydrogen imports from outside of the EU, we are precisely talking about this and about how these import volumes will be included and integrated into large-scale supply routes for the European hydrogen. And in particular, in the exercise conducted by the European Hydrogen Backbone, we are talking about notably two main corridors, one going from more, let's say, Morocco and then Spain, and then converging towards Central Europe. And on the other end, one going more through Italy, from Tunisia and Algeria, for example. So which would be a second corridor. So there's already a vision for the European actors on what could be these hydrogen supply routes. But for example, in Just Green Africa, we have an interest in trying to re-evaluate this and see what it really means in terms of a pan-European hydrogen infrastructure, for example. In particular, I would say that it's been a few years now that in general scenario creation exercises, we would see notably transmission system operators, both for gas and electricity, try and build a consistent vision on what would be the needed volumes of imports and, well, the reasonably expected volumes available, and try and see which role these volumes would play in the general supply-demand equilibrium for energy in Europe. So, for example, some of the exercise we have been basing the study on is the 10-year network development plan by the ENSO-E and ENSO-G in Europe. So, in particular, there would be different scenarios regarding the import potential for hydrogen. And well, you would also see volumes that are mentioned in the report by the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative. And well, this goes with a vision that is iteratively built on the role of these imports in the supply-demand equilibrium for the European energy system. And for example, in the map here, you see that there's a question about the complementary role of direct gas import, like hydrogen, gaseous hydrogen imports, notably through repurposed pipelines, and some imports that would come through shipping with different hydrogen vectors. And this is also a question that we wanted to integrate in the study methodology. Which leads me to one of the key questions of the study, which is, once we have these expected volumes and we can play with different scenarios on this, and maybe a first visions of the first projects that are implemented and the capacities that are projected in terms of notably cross-border infrastructure, we want to see if it matches. We want to see if when we expect and when we hope for important volumes of imports from Africa to the European energy system, do we have an infrastructure that supports it? Because this means notably important flows between European countries. And so there's a real question on the flexibility needs and dimensioning within the European energy system. So as I said, this is one aspect of the questions addressed by Just Green Africa, but it's interesting to see how different scenarios regarding the volumes and the vectors of the hydrogen imports from the African Union can impact what we think of the needs for hydrogen infrastructure in Europe. So this leads me to the main part of this presentation, which is about the assessment of hydrogen infrastructure needs in an optimized version of the European energy system. So in particular, we've been focusing here on 2050, and I will shortly introduce the methodology here. So, well, to be clear, this study has been based on our market modeling tool, Artelis Crystal Supergrid, which is a web-based platform on which you can model several energy vectors. And so in particular here, we have been conducting a study with both the hydrogen and electricity layer in order to dynamically model the coupling between through the electrolysis capacities. We have been conducting an optimization that takes into account both the investment needs and the operation of the energy system. So we have been playing with a hourly time resolution in order to address the short-term flexibility needs. And well, as I mentioned, this is a web-based platform. So we've been able to easily update the modeling assets and the modeling features in order to better represent the hydrogen value chains representing the African imports. So, well, you can learn more on our website if you want to know more about the tool. But so this has been conducted with our multi-energy market modeling tool, Artelis Crystal Supergrid. Just to present a bit more in details the methodology, what we have been doing is optimizing at the same time the investment decisions made by the model. So in particular, with a certain catalog of investment options that includes, well, in particular, hydrogen infrastructures like cross-border pipeline capacities and hydrogen storage, including underground hydrogen storage. And on the other end, we have been also allowing the model to invest in more power-related flexibilities. So in particular, the electrolyzers to like dimension the domestic generation and hourly patterns of the generation of hydrogen in Europe. and other flexibility solutions like cross-border power interconnections, electric batteries, and so on. So the model is able to play with different technologies and the related investment decisions, and at the same time, in the same optimization, in the same optimal function, the model needs to minimize the operation costs of the system. So we reproduce the full operation of the electricity markets, and then we optimize the hourly generation by the electrolyzers, and the supply-demand equilibrium then for both electricity and hydrogen. What we get as an output is both related to the investments, so we would have maps of the installed cross-border capacities from pipelines, for example, and we would also have operational insights into the system, so price patterns, generation curves, and so on, and in particular, the hourly dispatch of the electrolyzers and the hourly consumption from different assets, including the storage assets, storage injections, and so on. So yes, we have this joint operational and investment-oriented vision with a same modeling approach. To tell you a bit more about the input data and the reference 2050 European power system scenario, we have been basing the analysis on the distributed energy scenario from ENSO's 10-year network development plan 2022. There's recently been a 2024 version of this scenario. So, this type of studies could be updated with this, but this was the most up-to-date source at the point when we did the study. And in particular, this scenario from TONDP, so the distributed energy scenario, is the one with most renewable capacities, which is interesting in terms of variability of the available low-carbon electricity for electrolyzer. And in particular, this scenario was the one that is most aligned with the Fit for 55 package at this time. So it was also interesting to try and stick with the European visions for the development of the hydrogen system. We have been updating the scenarios with commodity and carbon prices that come from REPowerEU documents, so to try and take the most up-to-date assumptions. And so at this point, we consider that for this 2050 scenario, the hydrogen consumption in the EU 27 perimeter would be a bit more than 60 megatons, still very oriented toward industry and transportation use. But at this point, we also model the possibility to have power generation from hydrogen, so we would have H2 turbines as well to produce electricity, and the model is able to decide the exact amounts that are of hydrogen that are targeted to this use. So that's it for the general power system scenario that we have been implementing. And then based on this reference case, we have been fully optimizing the supply of hydrogen, and in particular playing with different scenarios for the African green hydrogen imports. And so there would be in other aspects of the Just Green Africa project and other deliverables, there would be some precise evaluations of the potentials and the road mapping for the development of these imports and the development of a hydrogen sector in Africa. So for this, the interest for us was to present alternative realities that are not fully comprehensive of what could realistically happen. But the idea was to play with contrasted scenarios just to try and identify no regret avenues and general conclusions. So for these scenarios, we have been playing with both the import volumes that we allow for the model and the available transport routes and energy vectors for the hydrogen. So in particular, we have been focusing our attention on North Africa with two main regions, one Morocco and the other Algeria and Tunisia, which is a reference to what was also in the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative. And for these regions, we have been implementing, so in scenario one, rather conservative volume based on the roadmaps that have been presented by these countries. For scenario 2, we have been representing more optimistic volumes that also correspond to the roadmaps that have been edited by these countries. And then for the other scenarios, we have been playing with different options regarding the transportation routes. In particular, for scenario 1 and 2, we are only allowing the model to invest in cross-Mediterranean hydrogen pipeline, so with a certain potential for the repurposing, and then the possibility to go a bit further with new offshore pipelines, which is rather expensive. So in some of the scenarios, the model can only play with pipelines, and in more advanced scenarios, so scenario 3 and 4, we have been allowing the model to directly ship hydrogen from the African regions to, in particular, Northern Europe, through the shipping of ammonia, and through a supply chain that corresponds to the shipping and cracking of ammonia. So in particular, for scenario 3, we just have the optimistic hydrogen imports and the 2 options for hydrogen transportation. And we wanted to try an additional scenario where we consider additional volumes for other regions. So, for example, we have been integrating some plans from the Egypt roadmap, and also something from Western Africa, from Ghana in particular, just to go further with the total availability of imported volumes and see how it affects our results. So to be a bit short about this, I want to present 3 key results, and then there will be more details in the deliverable that is to be published. So the first one is, based on all these scenarios representing different import volumes and alternative routes for the supply of hydrogen, we see that the model wants to invest in massive amounts of electrolysis capacities within the EU 27 perimeter. So you see that there is a big progression between scenario 1 and 2, for example. If I get back to the previous slide, we more than doubled the imported volume of hydrogen, but the electrolysis capacity installed by the model in EU 27 is still quite stable between all the 4 scenarios. What is interesting here is that the imports do not specifically reduce the need for electrolysis capacities, but the model is able to operate the electrolyzers in a more flexible way. This means that in the study, we have been modeling the European energy system at a country level. And in particular, we see that when we allow the model to import more from the African regions that we represented, the model still installs roughly the same electrolysis capacities, but will concentrate the generation on periods of the year where the electrolysis is cheaper and less carbon intensive in particular. And we see this, through the capacity factor of the electrolyzers that decreases when the import volumes increase. In particular, we see that this flexibility of the hydrogen generation is supported by a strong development of the underground hydrogen storage capacity from scenario 1 to scenario 4 as the volumes imported do progress. And we see in particular that this is not only because there are more imports and we need to secure the imports with the storage. It's also that the storage is used to provide flexibility with the electrolytic generation. So there's a very complementary role of the electrolysis plus hydrogen storage assets in the model, which is with capacities that are fully optimized by Artelis Crystal Supergrid. Then the second message is that shipping is useful and is chosen by the model, but does not fully replace pipelines. in particular, we see that in the different options that we offer the model, like in the different scenarios, the model will also always choose to repurpose trans-Mediterranean natural gas pipelines in order to import the volumes. And then, so we see that in scenario 1, it's sufficient for the imported volumes that we are considering. In scenario 2, we only allow the model to invest in pipeline capacity. So this is repurposing plus a residual capacity of newly built offshore pipelines. And then in scenario 3 and 4, shipping is allowed. So the model will go to the maximum of the repurposing potential and then rely on shipping of hydrogen towards Northern Europe. So there's a complementary role of the use of pipeline and shipping. But yes, we see that one of the key avenues is the repurposing of trans-Mediterranean gas pipelines. And finally, the third key result is that the development of a pan-European hydrogen infrastructure is no regret, because we see it in all the scenarios. In all the scenarios, we see that there would be important cross-border exchange capacities between European countries. This roughly corresponds to the supply routes that were also identified by the European hydrogen backbone, but this has been fully re-optimized, so these are independently obtained results. And we see that very important volumes are transported from between European countries in general in all the scenarios. And in particular, we see that there is a progression of these cross-border flows. You see it in green between scenario 1 and scenario 2. But well, even when shipping is involved and then the hydrogen directly goes towards Northern Europe, you would still have a lot of exchanges between European countries. And this is also linked to the fact that there are strongly heterogeneous situations between countries that will be main exporters of hydrogen and European countries that will be strong importers. So that is for the main conclusions of the study. I invite you to read the deliverable when it comes out in the next few weeks. And well, if you want to look at the works that are mentioned in this work, so of course there's the report by the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative that I mentioned several times during the presentation. But at Artelis, we have also been working with similar approaches, notably last year in the METIS project that we conduct on behalf of the European Commission DGNR. And there was this study, that's METIS 3 study S8, on the assessment of hydrogen infrastructure needs in a REPowerEU framework for the 2030 horizon, as opposed to here where we are talking about the 2050 vision. You can also visit our website, in particular if you want to consult more studies conducted with the Artelis Crystal Supergrid modeling tool. So yeah, I put the link in the description here. Thank you very much, and I hope we still have time for a little Q&A.
Thank you, Thomas. We surely do. I think your presentation triggered a lot of questions. So I'd like to hear from the participants with whom would have questions. And answering to Salima in the chat, we will indeed send the presentation by email. There is a comment from Maham. Maham, if you'd like to speak up about what you mentioned in the chat.
Yes, good morning. The president of MARAM, which is the Morocco Asset Management Reliability and Maintenance Association, based in Rabat, linked with the international organization with 40 countries. I would like to just add something in the presentation. I didn't see the opportunity to produce green hydrogen starting from the waves, and also to transport green hydrogen by liquid which is very interesting because we obtain more results about the volume. We can optimize the volume, and it's more stable instead of the gas. So I think these two ways are very interesting to explore. And if you need more details, we can send presentation we have done during the World Power to X about it and why it's very competitive, and also why it's accessible and easy to install for every country and international.
Thank you very much. I see, Stephano, you have your hand raised.
Yeah,
so,
maybe I can answer on both the topics if you don't mind, Thomas. So the first one is that in the project we are mostly looking at electrolysis. So this is why we are not presenting any, let's say, potential route related to production of green hydrogen passing through biogas or syngas and then extraction of hydrogen from there, just for information. And regarding the second topic, you're right that of course liquefied hydrogen is better in terms of volume, but we have to consider that if we look at exporting via liquid hydrogen tankers, due to boil-off issues, we have to consider that we can lose up to the 50% of the mass that we are transporting due to, let's say, really traditional flushing and also increase of the temperature. This is something that, for example, has occurred in the famous Suso Frontier work and journey that is currently ongoing between Australia and Japan. So, of course, once we will look at exporting of hydrogen via ships, we will look at it via liquefaction, of course, but at the same time, what we were considering is to, if possible, take advantage of the existence of natural gas infrastructure and, let's say, consider this injection in the pipelines.
In fact, for the second answer you just mentioned, I wanted just to inform you that in the technology we are working, this is a unique technology according to what we have learned with Airbus and also Ariane. And this technology, especially for the tank, didn't permit to lose the quantity of 25%. You cannot lose this quantity. There is a unique brevet about this. And again, if you wanted to discuss more, we can give you a presentation. It's with a French and Switzerland company, which is SHZ. And the ex-PDG was in Rolls-Royce and also Ariane. So this is a unique technology. And they are discussing with a huge company like SNCF and others. So if you need more details, I can send it to you.
Yes, for sure. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have a response from Frank.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to also mention that we did quite a bit of work within a sister network, DII Desert Energy, where we launched a liquid hydrogen task force. And last week in Vienna, we actually launched a liquid hydrogen white paper. All the people that we worked with in drafting the paper actually told me that the 50% losses are typical for the space industry, where it doesn't really matter. But there is available technology going forward where you actually don't lose any hydrogen due to boil off by of course, insulating the tanks, but also not filling them fully, etc. Don't completely empty them, etc. So there is management around this that reduces the losses. And also in terms of scale, the people that do modeling often take existing capacities, 30 tons per day, which is expensive. But going forward, every company is working on larger scales. In China, they've already now have operational 450 tons per day liquefiers, and those are a lot more cost efficient than what we currently have. So also in terms of modeling, liquid is actually not very well represented, and I will share the white paper with this group. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. a lot of sharing, which is actually the goal of this webinar. So going the right way. Thank you for email, Ms. Bandaly. I see another question in the chat from Dr. Labed for Thomas. Have you considered EU investments in North African countries or only investment within the EU?
Sorry. So only investment within the EU would be the answer. Like in the model, we only implemented investment options in the European energy system because this is the main parameter that is explicitly modeled. And then importing volumes are exogenous in the model. In particular, we mentioned Morocco. We have been working with the ISSA Research Institute that is part of the Just Green Africa Consortium to validate our assumptions on the volume that would be available. But we do not explicitly model in this exercise the generation of the hydrogen in Africa directly, in the African countries. We just consider it as available supply volume on which we apply a certain seasonal pattern regarding the availability of these volumes that takes into account notably the renewable potentials in different African regions.
Thank you, Thomas. I hope this answers your question, Dr. Labed. I suppose it does. So do we have any other question regarding this presentation? If not, we can move to Frank's presentation. Milou, please.
Yeah, just a quick question, if I may. So when I look at the import scenarios for 2050, right? If I'm correct. So I will see then in a pessimistic scenario 5 million tons, and in an optimistic scenario 13 up to 15 million tons coming from Northern Africa to Europe by 2050. So that looks a bit different from the Repower EU ambition that is already talking about 10 million by 2030. So how does that work? Is that because you use the renewable energy production scenarios from ENSO-E, where you will find a bigger potential within the EU to produce green hydrogen? Or can you explain a little bit more on that?
Yes. So we for the so first the objective that you mentioned is so for 2030 with the idea that would be 10 megaton of imports. So on these 10 megatons, we sorry, 4 megatons are imported through ammonia and other derivatives. So there would not be explicitly modeled here because we consider that this would not be correct. So we can compare with the 6 megaton that is imported in terms of gas or liquid hydrogen. And so this is projections from ENSOs in the these are from the national roadmaps, and this is for 2050, so a bit different from this exercise. This is from a bit different from what you mentioned. What I'm saying is, in the pessimistic scenario, we are indeed under the 6 megaton that are expected for 2030. But in the 6 megatons, there would be import from other regions. So this is only for North Africa, but for example, in TUNDP scenarios, there would be also import from Norway, from Ukraine, and international shipping in general. So this is the vision just from Africa, and with a pessimistic approach that corresponds to the lower volumes that are presented in the national roadmaps of these different countries. Indeed, this may be below the Repower EU trajectory, just to see how it affects the general analysis. What's interesting also is in our model, the demand is directly taken from these DRNDP scenarios. So if we were to have assumptions where we really reduce the supply of hydrogen through the imports, at some point we would also need to reconsider the demand projections because well, this may become infeasible by the model, and well, we would consider that we are in a general trajectory where this ambition is not met. But with all these scenarios, we are with something that is roughly compatible with the current ambitions, or at least the current roadmaps of the different considered countries.
Thank you, Thomas. Milou, does this answer your question? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now we'll move to presentation. Frank will speak about the role of transport and storage of energy in our global energy system. Please, Frank, the floor is yours.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good. So, well, first of all, thanks, Thomas, for your excellent presentation. I think this presentation fully supports what you're saying. There's a lot of talk about flexibility, about storage, the role of infrastructure, and also that you can actually that you have to use hydrogen also in the electricity system. And there's a lot of confusion about this, so I think it's good to underpin this with your modeling, but also maybe perhaps a more global perspective that I will share with you today. So first I'll get into the energy transition, then I'll touch upon some system aspects of energy, and then you know, the focus of the work that we've been doing for almost a year now is to look at storage as an element of the energy system, and some of the key findings in that. Now, the energy transition, I mean, this sums it all up for me. If you go and open a catalog of a DIY store, then you can actually really see how cheap renewable energy has become. Because you can buy a window, 2 square meters, for about $400, and a similar size solar panel is only a quarter of that. So a window is 4 times more expensive than solar. And this changes everything. This has been, you know, the major driver of renewables in the last couple of years, whereby solar has been, let's say, the default option if you need new electricity globally. More than 80% for years now of new additions has been renewables for this reason. But it's also important to realize that electricity is only part of the equation. Roughly 20% of our final energy use in 2020 were electrons, and 80% are still molecules. And there is good reasons for that, and you know, through this presentation you'll hopefully better understand. And you know, if we then look at the electrons, the electricity sector, that's where we've made most progress in terms of renewable energy and cleaning that up. You know, it's currently almost 50% of global power is now being generated using mostly solar, wind, biomass, and hydro. And that trend is going forward because, you know, again, that's now cheap. It's the cheapest default option. And that is very helpful in cleaning up at least the electricity sector and reducing emissions. But if we look at the molecules, it's a little bit more difficult. There we only have 10% biomass, and the rest are fossil fuels. So that is the reality. One of the major trends in decarbonizing our energy systems actually do more with electricity, because we know how to do that cost effectively. And then, of course, if you electrify things that, for example, transport, we can use an EV instead of an internal combustion engine. We can run compressors that now run on natural gas, on electricity. So all of these things, you know, heat pumps for heating buildings and houses, use more electricity, and that can be done in a renewable way. But what does the end game look like? Of course, we also need to clean up the molecules. What does the end game look like? By 2050, most scenarios end up with 50% direct use of electricity. There is not many that go beyond that, and also not many that fall short of that. So whether it's the IEA, IRENA, even the oil and gas companies, they roughly land here. So you have an electricity share in final energy use that is half of whatever we use, and that is all clean. So let's assume that latest by 2050 we reduce all the emissions to zero. But then if we look at the molecules, they also have to be clean, and there is only a few options that we have. We can continue burning hydrocarbons. It's very unlikely that we will be completely without them in the next 25 years, but then we have to capture the carbon and store it. There's limited potential for this. I mean, you don't have the ability, for example, to capture carbon on a truck or on a car. So that is really limited to large, single sources of emissions, and also the geology is not everywhere available. We can increase the use of biofuels, we will, but again, there is also limitations. It needs a lot of land, water, we're competing with food, etc. So I do think that most new biofuels will actually be waste. Waste to energy is a big thing that we have not so far really captured to the full extent. And then there is hydrogen, and green hydrogen and all its derivatives, they look and feel a lot like photovoltaics. You can do them at any scale and basically anywhere. Wherever you have a green electricity, and of course, there's differences in cost, etc. But we have that with many other things now also. Even with fossil fuels, very different cost points, and we still use all of them. And in my view, if I look at from a distance, far the most versatile, molecule that we have at future mix. Now let's look at the energy system, and I think this is very poorly understood very often. If you look at how we trade oil and coal, this is the oil trade flows. We have a lot of oil in the Middle East, and then we send it to places where people live and work. Russia is another big oil producer, and Venezuela, and that's actually not where most people live. People live in other places. So there is big trade flows currently. This is not a big surprise. And the same for coal. We have a lot of coal in Australia and Indonesia and South Africa, and we ship that all over the world to places again where people live and work. If we then look at where people live, this is a picture that shows the population density. Of course, the darker regions are where the population density is high. So if we then focus on Europe, not a lot of land, but a lot of people. If you then compare that to the Sahara Desert, there is a lot of land and not many people. If we then look at the renewable energy potential, and this is basically supporting all the arguments that were made also by Thomas, then we have places where you have solar energy deficit and surplus. And green is a surplus, so you have a lot more potential than you would need in the area. And if it's red, it's the other way around. Europe, again, it cannot be self-sufficient. It wouldn't make sense. Of course, you can do everything, but this will not happen. And the Sahara Desert is a potential exporter. And this is, the trade flow that we're discussing today. Solar, of course, there's also wind and other things, but from a solar energy perspective, this is where you have the shortest the lines. You can actually connect it via cables. That's already happening, but also via pipelines. So these trade flows are what we're talking about. And if you then look at the difference between electrons and molecules in terms of infrastructure, these are two pieces of infrastructure that connect the Netherlands with the United Kingdom. And both cost about €500 million. That's the BritNed cable and the BBL natural gas pipeline. So for the same amount of money, you end up with electricity, 1 gigawatt capacity. And The gas pipeline is actually much more powerful. You have 15 gigawatts of capacity. So with the same amount of money, you get 15 times more energy throughput through infrastructure. And this is one of the reasons why gas and other molecules are so powerful, because it's so much cheaper to transmit on a large scale than electrons. Of course, we'll do electrons, we'll have cables, because then immediately you can connect the markets. But if it's about bulk transport of energy at the scale that we're looking at, we need molecules. Last year, we started looking at storage as an element of the energy system. One of the things that I found out was that it's actually poorly understood. It wasn't just me. I didn't really get the full picture of storage. Of course, we all know storage and energy storage, but what is the role in the energy system? That was actually something that I was shocked to find out how little there is in terms of overall picture around this. And there is three reasons for storage. One is technical, that there is very often a supply and demand imbalance. So you have seasonal patterns, you have patterns of different types, and then you need to have a buffer in between. And the other two are emotional. One is anxiety, when you are scared that you may run out of energy. Energy security is, of course, a big thing. After the oil price shock in the 1970s, the IEA was founded, and all the OECD countries now have 90 days of oil, strategic oil reserves. The recent shock with Russia and Europe is another example. So now we have also the same for natural gas in Europe. And the third one is greed. If you're an energy trader, don't be offended. This is just a presentation. I like to grab your attention. But of course, there's a lot of storage in trade, because you can buy when it's cheap and you sell when it's more expensive. And that is a business. And those are the three reasons for storage. And what I wanted to understand was how much there is. And this is actually what we found out, that there is not a single place on the planet. Nobody knew so far. So we have primary energy demand of about 168,000 terawatt hours per annum. And the largest part of that is carried in the form of oil, 32%. Then next is coal. Third is natural gas. Electricity, 17%. This far, this knowledge was available. But then how much storage there was not available. We then did the numbers, did a lot of research, talked to many people, and oil storage is 26.8%. That's almost 10 billion barrels of oil that are in floating storages, onshore, offshore, in gas stations, et cetera, et cetera. Coal storage is about 20.6%, so 1/5 of all global annual demand for coal is in storage. Natural gas, slightly more difficult to store, also not as global a commodity as the other two, 13%, and electricity, which is 70% of all primary energy demand. And this is hydropower, this is solar and wind and nuclear. The storage downstream from the generation is only 0.03%. And this is exclusively pumped hydro. There is a little bit of batteries, but not much. Of course, batteries are growing fast, but it's really insignificant. So the storage in our global energy system, they're all molecules, all of it. Again, electricity storage and batteries and pumped hydro is insignificant and will remain insignificant. If we add the 17% in the overall number, then the average storage reduces to 17%, but it's probably more insightful to look at the molecules in themselves. We then, so this is the current situation. We then wanted to know, okay, so this is now, what does the future look like? And we looked at many scenarios. We compared many from BP. This is the one that we actually selected, IRENA. IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, we know them very well. This is a scenario that's actually compliant with the Paris Agreement. So it's a 1.5 Celsius scenario. IRENA is pretty bullish on energy efficiency. So they think that we can actually run the planet on less than 100,000 terawatt hours total final energy consumption. And the makeup is as follows. Slightly more than half will be direct use of electricity. There's still some fossil fuels with CCS. Modern biomass is increasing. Hydrogen, mind you, this is only direct use of hydrogen. And then there are some others, district heat, etc. So this is not hydrogen for the electricity. I think that is an important disclaimer, and it's also in tune with what Thomas was saying about the electricity system that actually needs hydrogen. We then, put it all again in an overview, and this is the 168,000 terawatt hours demand, and we looked at the electricity sector. So we have a huge amount of electricity in our system, 30,000 terawatt hours, 17%. But the storage is only 0.03%. So how can a system like this work? And it actually can't, not with the 0.03%. So the storage of that electricity system to always match supply and demand, especially now with an increasing share of variable renewables, relies on molecules. 60% of our electricity is still generated using molecules, and that's mostly coal, but also natural gas. There's some oil, etc. And as we've seen before, there is 20.8% storage in the molecules. So the electricity system actually runs on storage in molecules currently. And then if you go back to the IRENA scenario and you look at that electricity system, we ran the numbers and it just doesn't add up, unfortunately. And again, we don't want to bash IRENA, but we asked them. So we had conversations with all the modelers. We asked them, how much storage do you have? The first answer was always, we don't know. And then after a couple of days, they did some digging in the model, and it was very little, usually single-digit percentages, so nowhere near the 20% in the large share of molecules that actually supported flexibility. So then we had to figure out a way to make this actually work, because how do you run an electricity system which covers half of all your final energy demand? You need molecules. We also looked at batteries and pumped hydro. It's just not there. So it has to come from molecules. We then added 50% of the electricity is generated with molecules in which there is flexibility because of storage. And that is down from 60% right now. So it's already, stretching it a little bit, but then you end up with, different numbers. We had to basically add, 50% more energy to make the electricity system work. And this is something that, it's I think a fundamental flaw in some of these global, scenarios, if you will, where basically they assume a certain demand in the future, and then, okay, how can we cover that? But then they don't really model the electricity system to the level, for example, that Artelis does, hourly modeling, taking storage, transmission, and all of these things into account. Neither the BP model nor the Shell model nor the IRENA model took this into account. And the drivers for storage will not change. We will have strategic reserves. You cannot do it with electricity. It needs to be in molecules. People will trade, as I've showed you. You will have places where you have low-cost green molecules, and you will have the demand centers that will be deficit in that. So the same drivers that we will have in the future are there today. What about batteries? Well, we looked at all the scenarios, the forward projections. The IEA net zero scenario says that it will grow to 17 terawatt hours by 2050, making it bigger than pumped hydro. And together we'll have 26 terawatt hours. Unfortunately, that is only 0.02% of demand, so it's actually going down. And this is exponential growth. Even if we predict 5 times more, it'll be 0.1% of demand. So this will not save us. This will not give us a functional electricity system. However, the cost is not insignificant. So the 0.2% of demand will cost 13% of all the storage capex. So we looked at the the overall storage capex now and in the future. We will have to spend a lot more money on storage, and this is the cost. It is a lot more expensive to store clean molecules than fossil fuels. A heap of coal is almost free. But an ammonia tank or hydrogen salt cavern, they're a lot more expensive. We currently have capex cost of $2.7 trillion. That is everything for oil, coal, and natural gas. But in the future, the percentage of storage in the system will reduce slightly from 17 to 16.7. But the capex cost will increase sevenfold to 18 trillion. So it's going to be a lot more expensive in the future. And this table sums it up. We now have 168,000 terawatt hours. It'll go down slightly to 148. Storage is around about 17%. Electricity storage after we've generated it is insignificant, but the overall capex is higher. So if you look at it like this, it actually looks a lot like our current energy system, whereby in 2050 everything is carbon free, and the trade flows will be different because we will import green ammonia from Mauritania instead of crude oil from Saudi Arabia, if we're looking at it from a European perspective. So the key takeaways from this work was that energy storage is molecules now and in the future. Energy storage is crucial because without it, the system doesn't work. So there's a big technical component in addition to energy security and trade. Most models underestimate storage. So it was a useful exercise so that we understood how these systems work. And, we will have to, brace for an increase in capex cost. Batteries and pumped hydro, again, insignificant in terms of the overall picture, but it's not insignificant in terms of cost. And hydrogen is indispensable. And I think this is also in line with Taylor's work. It's a lot more systemic than most people think. So if, we cannot say electricity first and then we'll look at hydrogen because we have conversion losses and we need electricity and yada, yada, yada. Electricity needs hydrogen. It just doesn't work without it. I think this is an important message that we need to keep reminding ourselves of. Also, in the public debate, we have to emphasize this a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank, for this insightful presentation. Do we have any questions from the floor? We have thanks.
So how many days do I go for my daily?
Yes, we have a question from Tufik.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Frank, for the presentation. I'm sorry if this was mentioned, but I had the connection cut several times. What would be the ideal storage if we can't rely really on batteries and hydro, which will always remain a very little amount?
Well, that'll be a mixture of biomass, green hydrogen in various forms. So you can turn hydrogen into a liquid, you can liquefy it, or you can make ammonia. If you have biogenic or carbon from air, then you can also make methanol. Liquids will be part of the trade flows as we have now. We have if you have a pipeline and you're not too far, you can pipe methane or natural gas, as we like to call it. But there is a growing fleet of LNG cargoes that are flying around, and we also see that the same will happen for hydrogen. Ammonia, for example. Yes, there is an extra conversion step, but it provides flexibility because you can sail anywhere from where you produce your molecules, whereas fixed infrastructure pipelines, you can only go from point A to point B. So in my view, I don't see any reason why that should in the future be extremely different. So you'll have liquids, ammonia, liquid hydrogen, methanol, etc., and gaseous. And gaseous storage, it'll be a combination of saline aquifers, depleted gas fields, and salt caverns. Europe, for example, has plenty of potential for salt caverns, both existing ones as well as new ones that you can leach out. Also the liquids. There is some terminals, but we'll probably have to embark on an investment program for all of this. But it'll be a mixture of gaseous and liquids.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Ms. Bandaly, you had your hand raised. Was that a mistake, or did you have a question in mind?
No, just wanted to thank Mr. Frank Wouters for the presentation. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have another question? No. In any case, this meeting was registered, so it will be shared with the participants and also with whomever would like to watch it. Now I'm just inviting you, Frank, to give some magic words to conclude this meeting and further embark us on the green hydrogen journey.
Yes, thank you. And, I think most of it has been said before. I think, this can be a beautiful story of regions working together. Africa can, develop economies and industries based on the fantastic green energy potential. And Europe is an eager and friendly neighbor that, needs Africa and, for the future energy needs. And, we can only hope that there will be, a mutually beneficial relationship. That is actually what we're working on in terms of industrial development in the countries of origin. A thriving economy, good jobs for people, and then we can, all benefit. So, yeah, I'm really, happy with this presentation. We're fully supportive of the Just Green Africa project, and I'm looking forward to the next events. Thank you.